I Hear Hell is a story that delves into the topic of mental health, and in total, it's a tragedy. Its purpose is largely a criticism of, both historically and presently, the care and treatment of mental disorders and overall mental health care as a whole, as well as the social reactions and familial reactions to such topics. It also widely serves as a hopeful reflection for the betterment of the future of such systems and social structures when regarding the topic. The story itself is framed in terms of the dissension amongst three chosen factions that encompass the overall treatment of mental health, with those factions being the mental health industry itself, the friends and family of such a person experiencing their respective state of mental unrest, and the spouse of said person. And through the reactions and actions taken towards the deteriorating mental state presented in the story, it is explored what the possible detrimental effects of well-intended actions are when taken with very little proper knowledge of how to truly care for a person with a sort of mental unrest. The story is written mostly comprised of personal experiences regarding the topic, and the title, I Hear Hell specifically, refers to a depressed and darkened state of mind being hellish and seemingly inescapable, as if some ethereal mental antenna is tuned in to hell itself.
This album from start to finish was a journey. I could see myself grow as a musician, understanding the business aspects of the music and how to write more proficiently. You can tell from the start of writing the album to the end of the album that my main goal was to push myself to higher and higher standards of musicianship, I guess. And this album meant a lot to me because Michael and I put a lot of work into it, and it was a very rewarding experience when we finally wrapped it up, that it made me excited for the next album and what's to come for Witch Club. And I'm really excited to show you guys, and I really hope you do enjoy this project that we put our hearts into and that we spent a lot of time making.
This record conceptually ebbs and flows to sonically convey the emotional values of the various sections that make up the story of this release. Each section, respectively, has its extremes from grandiosity to chaos to entirely somber. But the intention behind these sections is the story of a girl with a worsening mental state brought on by the triggering of a pre-existing disorder, and then further worsened by the reactions of those around her. This story was a precursor to, and one of the first in, what is a common theme of conscious decisions made about and for the creation of this record. Steele and I had sat down and wanted to prioritize new approaches to the writing and creation of this new project, and the project itself almost revolved around that concept. And making music almost entirely instrumentally was already fairly out of the norm for us as far as our experience in music, but it was fairly consistent with our influences. So the decision previously mentioned was the intention of following the emotional tide of a storyline as inspiration to write all of the tracks. And I Hear Hell specifically was a story I had mulled over for years and thought out very thoroughly, but just never did anything with. So bringing that to the table, we both felt it to be a good fit for the inspiration of, and had a sort of game plan to make an instrumental record. During a lot of the writing of this record, I was spending a large amount of time in airports and hotels and doing things in other states and countries, all while still working on this project. And I've always enjoyed the exploration and reactional creativity of videography and photography. And that passion has bled into the band in so many aspects. So when it came time for both in Technicolor and Repulsions respectively to have some sort of visual representation, it made a lot of sense to bring that work into the aesthetic content for the band. The in Technicolor artwork was a photo taken outside of Paris, coincidentally at the same time we began writing in Technicolor. And Repulsions was taken climbing down some cliffs in California. Both experiences have been incredible to be able to incorporate into the band.
The way we came about the artwork for I Hear Hell is pretty interesting. For a while, Michael and I were trying to figure out a way to capture all the emotion that the album brings and what would best represent it. One day at practice, we finally made the decision to outsource the work to artists whose work we've really enjoyed over the years and what they've done with other bands. I told Michael about this one artist I knew by the name of Monk One. He's worked on a lot of bands, from My Chemical Romance to one of my personal favorites, Blink-182. And at this point, we were doing this for shits and giggles, not even expecting a response back. By the time we sent the request and before the day ended with practice, we had already gotten a response back, in which blew our minds. It was one of the holy shit moments in the band that we were both really stoked on, and it was just a really cool way of how that developed. And it was a very smooth process from the time it started to the time it finished, and it was cool to have it be a part of the record.
The opening track came about messing around in Pro Tools with different instrument packs and sound libraries. I've always loved soundscapes and things of that nature, so it's something that I write commonly, and the idea of it becoming the opening track and setting the tone for this project came about fairly early on. So in writing it, we had already known that in Technicolor would directly succeed it, and it would be the opening track. The tone of it starts off as a sort of foreshadowing to the darker and more ambient tone of the record, and from there it was just a matter of writing the ending to flow into In Technicolor.
In Technicolor was a fun song to write. Since it correlates to a relatively happy place in the story's timeline, I wanted to keep a poppy aspect of that in the song. At the time of writing the song, I was learning how to hybrid pick, and I really wanted to incorporate it into that song, and you can hear it with the intro. My favorite part about the song though was the bridge. It has a quirky 4/4 feel to it, where it would fall off beat and then back on, and I thought it was a really cool way to introduce odd time signatures not only to the record itself, but to the audience and fans as well.
In Technicolor is the introduction to the story of the record. It's conceptually our opening scene. The main character is the girl previously mentioned, but the narrating character that the story is framed through is her romantic partner. So the lively and upbeat nature of this song is depicting the very happy and fruitful relationship and life that they have grown together, while feeling almost listless and flowing. But at this point in the story, extreme outside stressors begin to manifest themselves into the life of the two. And until this point, obvious indicators of underlying issues into the main character's mental health are apparent, but written off as her being unique. But these stressors exacerbate her mental state into one of unrest, and this unrest is portrayed through the varying rhythms and time signatures, and adding more chaotic parts to show the listlessness being aggressively broken up.
Lightning was one of the more complex songs on the record. Michael showed up to practice one day and he had this insane drum pattern that was really hard for me to understand rhythmically. We were both super stoked on it, and I knew that we had to start it with the full drive that was brought to the table from the drums alone, which inevitably led me to writing that tapping part that you hear in the very beginning. Lightning was super fun because it was the song that we sat down and fully incorporated big sounding, reverbed out pedals through layers and backing tracks, which I thought was super cool because I'm super into pedals, and that for me was probably the most fun I've had on the record out of all the other songs. The ultimate goal of writing Lightning was to tell a story from start to finish, and with us being who we are, we wanted to round out the song with how we started it, and that was with a bang. I decided to challenge myself, and I wanted to push my abilities to the max and finish it out with a solo. And that was also an incredibly fun experience for me because that is the first time that I've ever had to write a solo for anything.
Lightning is interesting in the fact that instrumentally it was written entirely on drums before anything else. In the story, Lightning is characterized by the extreme worsening of the character's mental state from the actions of the people around her. And during Technicolor, events occur and cause distress into her life that may be greater than normal, but her reaction is that of trying to cope and deal with said events. The coping is of a fairly manageable nature to her, but raises alarm in her partner and family. This is the large aggressor in the story of the people around her trying to help her in the ways that they think are needed and appropriate and well-intended. And this story is based in the 60s, so much of that help comes in form of medical treatment and hospitalizations that bring her from coping into mentally fractured. Lightning brings an incredibly aggressive tone that intersperses with large ambience to convey the new instability in her life and her attempts to regain control over her situation. And finally, Lightning ends with a great tragedy and loss. I Will Be Destructive is the turning point of the entire record. It was originally written while in California, just messing around with very dense chords, trying to make up more complex melodies with those chords, but ended up naturally turning into something very grandiose and unique. Its involvement into the story is in two different ways. The first being one major characteristic of the main character we focused on is that she is an incredible pianist and has a deep love for playing piano. And the two piano songs are moments of synchronicity between the story and the music in the sense that they allow you to hear her playing. They are canonically songs that she wrote and would play. The second way being the portrayal of loss met with feelings of guilt and despair. And the first half of the story up until now is focusing on the girl in the story, and at this point, our focus has shifted to focusing on her partner due to the tragedy of the girl losing her life. So, I'll Be Destructive is the moment of our new character dealing with the news of the girl's death, and the title is descriptive of the reaction that our new character takes to that news.
When writing Repulsions, I initially had an unused riff from the previous band Michael and I were in before Witch Club was even formed, and I loved the riff so much that I just had to reuse it somehow in this new project we started. And you hear it in the beginning and the end, and I was really stoked on that. When writing the song, we sat down and discussed how we wanted to capture the moment in the story of recovery from loss. That's where the swing bridge came into play. The ultimate goal was to capture that moment to be extremely open and airy, and then suddenly lead to hopefulness, because that's where the story plays in. It's from loss to getting better. And it was a fun song to write and record because it was the first song that really introduced the swing patterns of music and the jazz aspect of it for me, and I really helped me grow as a musician, and I really enjoyed it.
Repulsions is the attempts at life after loss. It has large ups and downs, but mainly we just took that concept of trying to cope with loss and characterized it musically.
Never a Smaller Fate was a song before Witch Club was an actual band. We wrote it when our last band was in its final stages. With this song, we went back and forth discussing if we wanted to include vocals or not. And I'm really glad that we did, because I think that it opened up a lot of doors and potential. And I'm really happy that we took the risk and it pushed us as musicians to grow. I really think that people enjoy this song the most because it's definitely the poppiest of them all on the record, and it keeps a 4/4 consistently, so it's easier for people to understand. And I really do think this was a great way to finish the album, and I'm really happy that it turned out the way it did.
Never a Smaller Fate is the only vocally driven song on the record, and the lyrics depict the end of the partner's story. After many events of trying to cope and build a new life, there's an almost mirroring of the partner's story and the girl's story. There's a great tragedy that triggers a spiraling, and the story is a sort of character study on coping. But for the partner, his story finds him on the California coast while taking substances to end his life. The lyrics begin with him waking up after passing out in his car after taking a large amount of pills, and he's described stumbling down the beach during sunset and recalling memories of his life with his partner. The song ends with him having adverse reactions to the amount of pills he has taken and passing out once again in the water of the ocean and inevitably drowning. And that is the end of the I Hear Hell story that takes place from 1965 to 1969. Throughout this record cycle, we have fostered growth and really made a point of consistently keeping ourselves in places to grow. We spent so much time learning new skills, all with the intention of growing the skill set that this band holds. Looking back, most of the things we do now regularly are not things we did a year ago, from technical skill on our instruments to learning entirely new trades. I didn't even know how to tap on guitar or bass a year ago, and now it's in most every song. And that comes from this deliberate mindset we create around the band that we are going to consistently and constantly foster growth. There were many times where we began a song and came up with stuff by sitting down and writing riffs out of the skills that we lack. It would not only create new sounds, but would force us to expedite the process of getting better at our instruments. And that's not something that I would recommend for everybody, but for Steele and I, we have a passion for getting better at what we do. That's what excites us. And this album was a way to embody that into a solid and single piece of work that we could put all of that to. When it came to the recording process, we actively experimented with different techniques and different processes to see what we collectively liked the outcome of the most, and to really learn and become familiar with the way those techniques influence and capture the sound of this band. There are many unique aspects of this band, especially sonically, so the implementation of different techniques really gave us a further step in being able to control the way that we can capture the songs. In the early stages of recording on songs like Never a Smaller Fate and in Technicolor, we implemented mostly standard setups that we've used before with large mic setups for drums. We both mic'd cabs and went with DI sounds that we subsequently reamped through custom pedal boards that we would build for each section. But as we recorded more and more, we transitioned to more vintage recording techniques with significantly less microphones, capturing more sound, and more implementation of room mics. So the recording process has really spanned a large variety of techniques and styles, trying and tweaking everything we could in the name of experimentation. In the mixing process, we really utilized a lot of the post-processing to add soundscapes and textural layers to the songs. We did this in two fashions. We both did overdubbing through pedal board, basically improvising soundscapes, and then crafting the layers into something more tight and solid. We also made soundscapes through entirely digital means. We used a variety of plugins from Spitfire, especially their Lab series that gave a lot of really unique textures, as well as using sound packs from companies like Film Crux that were designed for filmmakers but gave us a lot of really unique and cinematic textures to add into the mix. For From there, I took the songs and handled all the mixing and mastering, except in the cases of Lightning, the mixing and mastering was handled by Eric Jensen, and Repulsions, where the mastering was handled by Eric. Retrospectively, the extra steps and efforts that we took to be as involved and as in control of the process of the song's evolution from infancy to fruition really allowed us to build our skills to be as well-rounded musicians as we possibly could, and to be able to completely handle all of the aspects that the band requires is something that we're really quite proud of.
In total, the experience of creating I Hear Hell has been a growing process that we're incredibly grateful for, and a process that has made us incredibly excited for the future of Witch Club.